Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today on Shaper Sessions. My name is Jake, and I have the whole stage to myself today. And we're going to focus on hybrid cutting. What do I mean when I say hybrid cutting? Combining Origin with the power of other shop tools. In this case, we're going to be focusing on our three main tools. We have Origin, our Festival track saw, and an impact or drill driver. With those three tools, we're going to build some practical high quality shop furniture, and we're approaching this whole thing as if you don't have a table saw. So that's why we're focusing on the track saw. Maybe you don't have space for a track saw, but you're trying to build out your shop and you need to do some casework. So things we're going to hit on: hybrid cutting, doing shelf pins, the 32mm hole system with Origin, and hardware install. By the end of the day, we are going to assemble a nice little tool cart that is actually going to be for a tap and die set for our engineers here, so they stop stealing my taps from the shop. So let's start off with showing you kind of my general setup that I got here. I'm working on some pre-finished 3/4 ply. I have it all taped out, and what I did on using Illustrator, I kind of laid all my components out in a manner so that the edges line up, because I'm going to do all those edges in one shot with the track saw. Let me kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So my cabinet, let's just start here, kind of long and tall, boom, boom, specifically set up to fit a set of drawers to fit all the taps. So I'm only going to have one hard shelf. And my connection method today is going to be just kind of quick and simple. It's just going to be screws. We're going to use that impact driver and drive screws directly down. All right. I'm only going to have one fixed shelf and then one door as well. So my fixed shelf is going to be right around here. We're going to do some dados using Origin, some through dados. And that's with a little bit of glue. That's also going to give us some structure around the midpoint of the cabinet. So that's our dado all the way across to the back. There we go. And this is where our blum hinges are going to be, with the door coming out and a quick little handle feature that we're going to cut ourselves with Origin. Other than that, we're going to have our 32mm hole system going all the way up, front and back, and use shelf pins to put in a floating shelf. Simple but effective. It's going to do a lot for our people, just to have a little space where everything in regards to tapping and is in one spot. So let me just explain to you how I go about this in my head. I primarily use Illustrator when I'm doing layouts like these. So in Illustrator, I will just start with a box. This is really just to get my measurements down. And of course you can use a 3D CAD software, but again, I'm just going to focus on my 2D software for today. I'm going to physically draw in where I want my shelf to be. That way I can start actually laying out my cut files. Now I'm looking at this straight on, and I'm going to say, okay, this panel flips over here. I'm just going to place everything in line in Illustrator, and now I can take that rectangle. That rectangle is going to be sized to fit my 3/4 ply. So I'll place that in there. Notice how I'm extending past that because I want this to be a through dado. So I want my pocket, once I'm over cutting on Origin, to go all the way through. And I'm also bringing in my hole system, 32mm apart, all the way across. I'm putting in my mounting holes for the blum hinges, which are actually a little bit smaller. I'm going to cut those with a 1/16 inch bit. I have those on both sides. And that's really it. I'm going to take this exact thing, mirror it over to that side, and we're good to go. The next thing I'll do is I'm creating the door. So the door is going to be about, it's going to be this size minus 1/16 of an inch on all sides, just to give it some freedom. So I'm using that same, lining everything up. I'm creating my door. Everything's in line, so I know exactly where to put my holes for my cup hinges. Right there. Pretty easy. Everything else is really just a square panel, so whether it be the top and the bottom or the floating shelf. So I plan out my system. In this case, it's about a 8-foot long by 30-inch wide piece of ply. So I'm going to fit all my pieces in there so that they nest together nicely. I'm getting limited waste. This is my ply. And all my panels are sitting in there. Again, this is how I'm building my file in Illustrator. And maybe I'll have the door down here, and so on and so forth. So all of these are spaced out so that when I make one cut, I'm doing a bunch back to back. Now, hybrid cutting is really all you need to do is you just need to cut these little corner crosshairs. Those are going to give you really clear marks that you can then come in with a track saw and line that right up to and do that whole line really, really quickly. All right. Reminder, I am doing the solo today, so as your questions come up, put them in the chat. I'll have them in front of me at the end during Q&A so we can go over that together. All right. Let's go ahead and cut the rest of the crosshairs. I've already done some of the work over on this side, so we'll focus kind of in this main area on our panels. Okay, it can get a little confusing too when you're working large and you're just cutting little small things. So never be afraid to just double tap that screen and it's going to zoom out for you. You're going to be able to see everything a lot more clearly. Again, everything that you cut turns a shade of blue. And that's my whole layout. You can see I created a grid down here on the bottom right. And I have all my panels laid out. A couple more things that I have left to do. I have my dado right here. I have a couple of holes to cut. And I have a couple of corners. So let's start with the corners. Again, I was saying we're only doing those really shallow. 0.03. That's fine with me. I'm going to give myself a little bearings here. Let's start down here. Zoom back in. Now I'm just on that corner of the material. I'm just going to cut right around there, giving myself a nice flat surface on both edges that I can line my track up to. I'm not doing this with an offset because again I'm only cutting 0.03 inches deep. It's really shallow, so I'm confident that I can just be nice and steady, go around each corner and give myself a good reference. So I'm going to go through and do all those. Alright, giving everything a once over, just so I make sure that I got all those corners. Looks good to me. Now that whole part of it's done. You can see here in the overhead cam that I went ahead and cut this top section of the door because the door is slightly different size than everything else. So I went ahead and I just did this with origin and cut all the way through. These are all going to line up nicely, but because the door is slightly shorter, I needed to do that by hand. And again, just wanted to get as much done with origin as I can and then make the track style part as easy and fast as possible. All right, next I'm going to do the last dado. So I'm only doing that 1/4 of an inch deep. And there it is. I'm going to start that with a pocket at a 1/4 inch deep. Then I'm going to change that to an inside cut and test fit with the piece of material that I have on the side. Right. Grab my spare piece over here. You know, ply, 3/4 ply actually turns out to usually be around 0.73 inches thick, so I've sized my rectangle specifically for that. And because they're the same size, it looks like I could afford to take just a hair off. You know, it fits well, but I'm going to do one more pass at, say, -3 thou on both sides. 0.003. Give me a 3. There we are. So, one more pass around the edge. There we go. Much better. That's what I want to see. All right. That is our through dado. Now, again, I just show you on the screen. The shape itself extends past the edge of my material because I want that to be completely through. In the past, we've covered double blind dados, in which case you would round over the edge of your material and you could have a completely floating shelf. But for this, I wanted to go all the way through. I wanted a flat front face. All right. I'm going to swap bits now, and we're going to do the remainder of the shelf pinholes. Shelf pinholes are typically 5 millimeters, so I'm going to grab either your 3 millimeter bit or your 1/8 inch bit. And we're going to talk about helixing. For those of you that don't know about helixing, we call Origin kind of a 2.5D tool. You know, primarily it works at the depth that you tell it to and doesn't do necessarily variable depth, but when it comes to helical cutting, you tell it what depth you want to end up at, and it will work its way down there in appropriate paths as long as it sits within the corrective range of Origin. So doing holes, things like that, small features, works really, really well with helix, and I'll show you how. You know, especially if you're doing a whole bench top that has holes all over it, you're going to settle down and you want to dial in your feeds and speeds to make that process go smoothly and safely and get good cut quality. But you don't want to be there all day long. So I will tell you how you can adjust that. All right, 1/8 inch bit in. First thing we do, tell the tool, let it Z-touch. Always take your hands off the tool just so you don't accidentally bump it while it's doing this. Set my offset back to 0. My depth, the depth of my shelf pins is pretty small. It's only about 0.37. There we go. So let's start off with one and see what that looks like. You can see here are my smaller holes. That's for the pilot hole on my Blum hinges. And that's my 5 millimeter hole. So the helix button shows up because that circle is the perfect size, fits inside my corrective range. I can toggle that on and off. If I toggle it off, it's just going to go straight down to that final depth, and then if you hold auto, it'll go around in a circle. I want to gradually take that material off. So my job is to just stay still, hit plunge, make sure helix is on, and let the tool do the rest. All right, so that was great, but I feel like because of the material, the sharpness of my bit, everything that I'm doing right now, I feel like I can bump that speed up a little bit. And again, all these things totally depend on what you're cutting, with what kind of bit, how big the hole is, how deep you're going. So trial and error. It's always best to stay on the safe side and work up to something that's faster than try too fast and regret it. So I'm going to bump that speed up from the default 10 to 20 inches per minute because I've tested it and I know it works. Yeah, there we go. And I'm going to do that again. So adjusting the auto speed is going to adjust how fast it goes around. Plunge speed is how fast it's going to dive into the material. But when we're talking about helixing, adjusting your auto speed is what you're going to be looking at. All right, let's do that at 20 and see if that fits better, a little better. Much better. Voila. So again, you're just kind of cruising along, tap and plunge. It even retracts for you once it's hit the final depth. And I sped that up to make the whole process a little faster. So if I'm doing, say, a cabinet that's 8 feet tall and I want shelf pins all the way up, I'm not going to be there all day long. So now I need to do the pilot holes. So I'm going to switch over to a 16th inch bit. I just want to give a little bit of room for it, for those mounting screws for the Blum hardware. Doo-doo-doo. Now, when doing tiny operations with a 16th inch bit, it's best to get, you want that upcut. You want that spiral to bring material out versus straight flutes, which are, great for cutting, but if you're just plunging and retracting, you're not getting as much of that chip extraction as you'd like with a straight flute versus an upcut. Alright, tell the tool we got a 16th inch bit in there, and Z-touch. I'm going to go back to those tiny little holes, adjust my depth just a bit, because 16th inch bits typically don't have that long of a length of cut. For obvious reasons, they're more fragile, they'll break. So I'll do 0.3, and that's going to allow us to go straight in and cut that hole. Alright, you may be wondering, why am I doing mounting holes on both sides of the cabinet? Just in case. Really, that's it, just in case. And I'm also, down the road, if I want to put doors on the front and back, I could. And again, shop furniture. It's all about function. And a little bit of style. I'm going to put the 1/4 inch bit back in, and we're going to do our handle detail and our hinge cups. All right. Now for our hinge cups, we are doing a depth of 0.5. Yep. Final depth of 0.5. But let's start with that handle detail. I just did a long oval, kind of a slot. I'm going to do my roughing offset as usual, go down in 1/4 inch depth passes, and then cut it to 0. I am going to have this little piece though that might break free once I cut all the way through my material, so always be prepared for that. I put some double-sided tape under this whole thing, but possibly not enough. Alright, handle detail is cut. Now I can come over the far edge for my plumb hinges. Always good to have a little shop broom or hand broom around, especially on big panel work. You just want to make sure your work surface is totally clean. You don't want any dust sitting on your tape because it might give you a low tape reading. Make sure you have everything working in your favor. Alright, I'll do this in 2 passes. Both my hinge cups. You can see this is actually a file available on ShaperHub. You can download, and I have it placed right on the edge of my door. So I'll pocket this, inside cut, then helix cut. Alright, we'll do a little test fit just to make sure. Beautiful. Now as I press that down, it expands those prongs, and we have a hardware-less attachment. Alright, hinge cups are done, handle's done. Wow, we got our dados done, shelf pins. I think we're ready to bring in the track saw. So I'm going to set this to the side momentarily and bring in very carefully bring in our long track. Now I'm going to start with my long cuts and then come in and do the shortcuts. I do have double-sided tape under there. That is going to be really handy for me because things won't move as I cut through. Get everything out of the way. And I'm just lining up those little crosshairs. So the first one, let's go ahead and do this bottom. Try not to hit anything. There we go. And make sure your surface is nice and clean. And because this entire bottom row is all lined up, I can really just line up this front edge down here and this far edge and be confident that every one in between is good. And boom. Alrighty. Make sure I have plenty of slack over here. And we're ready to go. Almost ready to go. Auto. Ding, ding, ding. All right. Whap, whap. I'm not getting power. Oh, that's why. You know, it helps when the saw is actually plugged into the vacuum. All right, now we're gonna make our cut. May have tripped a breaker. Absolutely did. There we go. Yep. Yeah. All right. One more try. All right. Made it. So that is our front edge. Ready to go. Now I got a couple more long cuts in the middle. I have two that line up beautifully. I'm going to start this one. You know, these tracks are great. They come with clamp, or you can clamp them down as well. I find as long as your surface is clean, it won't move around on you. But if you want to be extra cautious, there is a T-track that you can slide a clamp into and get underneath your material. All right. Beautiful. Get these little pieces out of there, and I got one more long one. I need to turn this around for. Cool. Yeah, everyone, please, just a reminder, great opportunity to get your questions answered directly live on the show at the end during Q&A. All right, ready to rip. There we go. Beautiful. I'm not going to move anything because I want everything to stay exactly where it is while I bring in my shorter track. And again, you can buy these in two sections that attach with connecting rods so that when you do need to do long cuts, you can. All right. Now I've done most of them. Only ones I need to focus on are right down here. Start at the very end. And I already cut the edge of that door, so it's really just the top panel up here. Nice. All right. There we go. All right, now we're lined up for the next one. And here we go. Oh, it moved on me. I'm going to move this camera out of the way briefly. There we go. Sweet. And my last cut, come around to the other side, just like so. And that's it. All sliced up. We can start pulling our pieces. I'm gonna leave my shaper tape on there because, you know, celebrate how it was made. And we can do some assembling. Right. First we got the door. Beautiful. Looking good. When you're using Origin a lot, I know I always talk about getting a really good flexible scraper and even sharpening it to get under little inlay pieces, but also getting yourself a nice flat bar, it's a little stiffer, is also a great idea for things like this. Okay, now I have to remember exactly which piece is what. And if I ever forget, it's nice because I'm keeping the shaper tape on there. I set my origin down, and I had the forethought to go ahead and write top, bottom, which are the same. Firm shelf, that's going in the dados. There's that firm shelf, and there's the floating shelf. So, kind of nice to be able to refer back to that if I so need to. Okay. It's a big project, a lot of things to pry off. Bear with me. It will come together. Only thing I'm going to take off is my double-sided tape. This is nice, pre-finished ply. The tape comes off really well, but also held really well. Also, I always love to see the design that eventually comes out of someone's spoil board. They use it for years and years. Every kind of project leaves behind some sort of mark. By the end of it, you have an art piece in itself, full of history of everything you've ever cut. That's when this comes in, when something doesn't want to come up. Right. Okay, that is all my pieces. So for the assembly, I'm going to talk about a couple of different options. The one that I'm going to do today is the most simple by just using some screws, but there's a lot of really cool connectors out there and methods of connecting, quick connecting, that you can use Origin for, or staying with the 3 essential tools you can also use your drill for. But let's go ahead and clear up our workspace so we can get this thing assembled. All right. One side, put that up on edge with this facing it, and I'm going to use that firm shelf, that middle part, as it's going to hold everything together while I assemble the rest. Might be easier to do this first. So boom. Nice solid fit. Love it. There we go. I know, I'm running out of space. All right, there we go. Or an extra pair of hands. I don't know. There it is. Beautiful. Now, that's my floating shelf. Got my top and bottom over here. I'm going to put some casters on this eventually so I can roll around the shop space. Cool. You know, make my life a little easier too, I'm going to bring a clamp in to hold these to exactly where I want them. Just like so. Just some light clamp pressure so I can still move things around. Making sure my edges are flush. Beautiful. All right, so I'll start off, I'll do a pre-drill. So it also gives me a countersink. And before I move on to the next one, I'm going to throw a screw in there so that it kind of holds everything together for me. Boom. I come over to the next side. using a square to mark my depth. I'm trying to hit that, put that screw right in the middle of that ply. Perfect. And let's move to the bottom. I want to get something in all the sides just so everything stays nice and aligned when we turn it over. More clamp pressure. All right. And finally, boom. A little bit of glue and a clamp there. That'll bring that together. And I can flip and put screws in the back. No. For the sake of time, we keep it there. But there's our case. We're going to put our Blum hardware in the bottom section so we can attach our door. Let's go ahead and do that. So I imagine it going in on this side. Okay. All right, I will take some of the shaper tape off, just because it's going to get under my hardware. I don't want that. Boom. It's unfortunate I can't show this off because it's all covered, but that 32mm hole system lines up perfectly. Forgot I had this camera right here. Nice thing too about Blum hinges is they're completely adjustable. If you haven't used them before, I definitely recommend it. You can dial in, like I'm sure I will have to dial this in, especially because it's a pretty wide door. I'm gonna have to do some sort of adjustment, and it's nice to know that I can. All right, let's put the final ones in the door. This is a fun part, so I get to clamp them down. Yeah. All right. Flush that up, and boom. That's not going anywhere. I could, but I'm trying not to. That one was a little snug. I could have afforded to take just a little bit off of that, but it's still going in. There we go. Just needed a little physical pressure. And clamped it down. There we go. We got our door. Voila. And the next fun part is snapping these in. I don't know if you can actually see this, but I can see it. There we go. Voila. I did do one. So there's a drawer. I can adjust that pitch so that it comes up a little bit and doesn't rub on the bottom. They're probably maxed out the other direction. All right. Voila. Even has soft close. The next thing to do is throw some of the, I knew where I put them, the shelf pins. Where did I put the shelf pins? There they are. So these shelf pins are designed for the 5mm holes that we put in there. Boom. Kind of eyeball it here. And that last piece, voila. There is our adjustable shelf. There we go. Whew, that was a very quick shop furniture project. Now it's ready for some casters. It's already pre-finished, so it's good to go. Now you just need to put your drawers in there, and you're ready to rock. Let's talk about, I just want to show you the cabinet hardware that I was talking about earlier. Something called the Lamello Cabanillo system. Too many things going on here. All right, go to the wide shot. So the Cabanillo system, everything is cut top down, which is really nice for origin. We don't need, we can, just like how I have had everything laid out, I can place those files in there. There are these little black pieces here that fit in, and the only feature on the opposing side is a 5mm hole. And a very coarse thread screw goes right into there. Brings it together really nicely. Alignment is super easy. I recommend this highly. We'll post the link in the chat, and you can also find the files, I believe, on ShaperHub for them. All right, folks, that's it. That's hybrid cutting in a nutshell. thank you so very much for joining me, and join us again in 2 weeks. Take care.